Hi, everyone, and welcome to this interview with a very special person who's got a phenomenal technology, which is keeping, I guess, our cities safer. So a bigger purpose in the technology than just making money. I'm joined by Gillian from Safe in the City. Gillian, why don't you tell me a bit about the technology, how you got into it, so our audience can learn about why it's so awe-inspiring.
Thank you so much. What a great introduction, Alpesh. I'm really happy to be here. So Safe in the City started as a personal problem as a newcomer from Vancouver over to London and using navigation apps to get around the city. But I also found that the technologies I was using, the kind of standard Google City Mapper, didn't necessarily have my safety in mind when I was traveling. So when I went one particular route, it followed, I actually ended up going into an alleyway where I had an unfortunate experience of two kitchen staff coming out and threatening to sexually assault me. Luckily, I got out of that situation, but I saw the opportunity of if I could leave a heads up to someone, a marking of some sort, that this had happened to me because there's so many other people who are taking a similar route to me in this central London location, and how that information could be so powerful, driven by the citizens and demanding about where we could actually make change and how technology could start representing a lot more of our experiences through our day-to-day journeys.
Yeah.
That was in 2017, and we've massively grown, and I can tell you a little bit more as we go along.
Yeah, and I've been sharing the screen with the audience as you're speaking, so they get to see your website and they get to see. I'm so sorry you had such an awful initial experience coming here when you did, but one positive thing that came out of such an awful situation is you created a wonderful technology. And what I want to ask you about is, of course, instantly everybody will relate to the problem you're trying to solve. You've actually managed to do that through the tech. You've managed to do that, and as you can see, through the BBC, TechCrunch, Evening Standard, Forbes, The Times, it's caught the public's imagination. Have you been surprised at the need and demand for the app, or is it something that you thought, well, of course, it's so obvious people would need it?
So many people have said actually the opposite. They're like, I can't believe this doesn't exist yet. Like, why hasn't this been created? And it's one of those things that I think we get used to, the technologies that are standard, that don't necessarily have kind of a safety lens and aspect on it, or have a certain message towards a certain group, which we started very much around women's safety and these normalized experiences of catcalling and sexual harassment, as you could see reported here, that do impact our journeys, do impact the economic areas and where we choose to live and work and how we journey through these spaces. So it actually is something that I believe people have caught on. It clicks right away when we have said it. And when we launched, it was around the hashtag Me Too movement. So there was this enormous amount of people coming together to say, hey, this has happened to me, whether men, women, any other gender. It's something that lives under the belly of a lot of our experiences of the city, and bringing that to light and applying a lot more of a preventative way that we can strategize and solutionize is part of that.
And the other thing is, I mean, the obvious thing that comes to mind is, of course, could be incredibly useful for law enforcement or community police officers if they're aware of where some of the problems are, to help our society feel safer as well. Have you been engaging with law enforcement as well?
Yes, very early on, one of our team members was a retired police officer, so who worked in strategic risk and the data insights. So we have partnered with the Metropolitan Police in London, so we can share those aggregated insights like you were seeing on the website. So they know these other types of offenses that are happening that may not always be crimes, but certainly impacting the safety and well-being of people in those areas, and how they could also bridge that with other community initiatives to help more people be engaged in each other's safety. So yes, police force and government is very key to this. And I think because I originally moved to London to work in public health, and that was my background, and work in a number of countries, bringing that lens of prevention and how technology can be applied in a really different way, I think has been really part of that joining of all these different community partners in, recognizing that, hey, safety is everybody's problem and responsibility. So let's work on it together.
And health tech in that broader sense is clearly something which is on the rise. We've worked together because of the Global Entrepreneur Program, which is a program within the Department for International Trade, which looks for outstanding technology entrepreneurs from around the world to set up their businesses here. And you're one of the outstanding tech entrepreneurs that we've been working with and bring the technology over here. Let's talk about entrepreneurship and technology. So in terms of obviously the app and what it does to solve a technological problem, how have you found for yourself the entrepreneurial journey? What have been some of the highlights? What have been some of the hurdles that you've had to overcome? And what advice would you give to other entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs who are beginning that journey?
Yes, the GEP for short has been so amazing, and Alpesh, you've been great champion of our work, as well as so many other people to name. Judith Milan was one of our deal makers at the start, and really helped us secure kind of a permanent place in the UK so that we could, scale our technologies. And again, we are now in Europe, and we're looking at other places. So they've been very instrumental with our growth. For being an entrepreneur, I think in some ways it becomes an accident. It was an accidental kind of falling into, as I mentioned before, I was in public health, and it was only because of that lens of kind of data and prevention and how we could use technology in that way that really pushed me. So I would encourage people not to be kind of, I don't have a background in technology, I've never learned how to code. There's so many opportunities and people to build that within your team to make something possible and tangible. I think by kind of taking that big leap, which I did, I did kind of shift careers. I didn't know many people in the UK when I landed here. It really was kind of going in the deep end, but I think in some ways that naivety and just driven by passion and figuring out this problem and dedicating kind of my life's work to it was part of that cementing. And I think people have recognized, okay, this person isn't going away. Let's figure out how we can kind of support, especially in the early days, and what it's advanced to now, which Safe in the City is not only an app. We've now introduced our i3 intelligence platform, so integrations with other mobile technologies that can offer safety functionality as people are connected to their devices in public spaces. So I would say that there are some challenges with being a woman in tech, and being someone that's non-technical, at least in terms of coding experiences. That definitely could create some barriers in terms of maybe the rooms that you're sitting into, the types of questions or even experiences such as sexual harassment that you might face in these rooms. But again, I think depending on your lens, you can take that as an opportunity. And I try to take any type of hardship as a stoic experience of how does this build me stronger, build my team stronger, build our cause or purpose stronger. So I think there's still a huge opportunity for women or other genders to actually come into this space and take your lived experiences and the connections that you have with other people who might identify like you, and bring that innovation and those solutions to the problem out there.
Are you broadly optimistic about more women coming into technology who want to come into tech, or do you sometimes just throw your hands in the air and go, for God's sake, this is taking so long, there are so many hurdles, how can we accelerate this? And the question to you is, how can we accelerate that? How can we ensure the hurdles you faced, others don't? Because you've mentioned harassment, sexual harassment. How do we ensure that that gets stamped out? I mean, if we look at, say, let's take racism in football, which is another sort of, it's a big social issue which is going on at the moment, and it's still going on and on and on. When the heck are these things ever going to get resolved? What do you have any insights, given your personal experiences, that can be done better, that the rest of us can learn from?
It's a great point, and I think, you know, we all have shared unsafe experiences or discrimination or, you know, prejudice of some sort. It's not something that many people, we can go, I have no concept of what you're talking about. It's just, how is that packaged, and is that package maybe recognized in our social threads that can actually help people kind of move past that, or is it even more of a challenge for people? So I talk about this in my TEDx Equality by Design, and that, again, I think technology with that design of equality can really unlock the power and wisdom of the crowd, because we are a lot more similar in our experiences than we are different, and we do need certain, basic needs like safety. But I think in terms of one of the great things that GEP offers is, a lot of different ways that you can get involved. And I am part of the Female Founders Advisory Board. So we have talked to, the Permanent Secretary General of State about some of these issues around sexual harassment, around VC investments, around, again, kind of some of the day-to-day challenges that we might have, whether coming from a technical or non-technical background. So I think representation and being out there is really important. And, I do really try to do that through my own activities online, because there often are these idealized kind of notions of like, that can't be me. I couldn't do that. And, we do need to continuously push that message that yes, you can, and there's more opportunity than there ever has been, and it will continue to move that way. So really encouraging and opening doors for people who need to be in the rooms when you are in the room, and maybe you are one of the few people who you identify with, or that you think needs to have more, voice in that room. So that's some of the advice I would give.
No, I think that's incredibly important, that you're willing to be at the forefront of that and be a voice and speak up and speak out. Of course, on the flip side, you have people who, and I know, and I found it more amongst women than men, and there's research to suggest why, that will be the success story, and they'll push their husband or they'll put the male partner to do the talking, partly because they're not so comfortable, whatever the reasons are. And of course, the downside of that can be that it perpetuates the problem that you've mentioned, that people don't realize, actually, that can be me, that I could actually be running that business, because I think that representation part is important. I think, and I'm sure you do, when you're coaching others and showcase, being a role model for them doing it. Obviously you've got to run the company at the same time, and that puts a lot of burdens on you. What are your ambitions outside of the company? And we'll come to your company ambitions in terms of the other work that you do in sort of on the equality side. What are your ambitions there?
Thank you. That's a great question. And I try to take a longer term view. And maybe this is another piece of advice. Entrepreneurship can feel very condensed, and you only have a couple years, get that investment, get that money in. And of course, that is needed for a lot of different reasons. But there isn't necessarily, to in my opinion, a failure of starting something. Those connections that you made, that, those achievements that have been accomplished, there is always, a trail of success if you want to view it in that way. But in terms of some of the things that I've started on and I want to continue through my career in entrepreneurship, is actually, again, relating back to the GEP, is being able to do a lot more public speaking opportunities. One event was the Warsaw-London Bridge. So went over to Poland with the deal makers from GEP, and was able to, again, kind of go speak to hundreds of women in Poland who were in technology or interested in technology, to share my story, to be on the judging panels, to, help harness and nurture some of the talent coming through Eastern Europe, which was fantastic as a Ukrainian heritage person. And with this public speaking, I've now actually speaking a lot more with now signed with Chartwell speakers, which is fantastic. And I'm actually writing a book which will be out later this year called Wired Influence. Now this has a focus particularly, I think, in the changes that we faced during COVID of being even more reliant and addicted or under the influence of technology, and how we really do need to be aware of how the industry is moving in particular directions, whether it's business models that are looking at kind of meta personal data and packaging that without maybe users' consent, whether it's our own mindfulness and practices around technology use, and how we can work better and leave a better digital footprint on what we want to create later down the line. So those are a couple of the things that I do. I also have dabbled in a cooking show over COVID.
Wow.
I have.
And you run a business.
And that, yes. And I do some coaching as well for mostly female founders in earlier stages. So I do keep busy, but they all, for me, stack on top of each other.
Yeah.
And that, again, I want to create a technology company that isn't necessarily, it's not predatory in its commercialization ways. And I want to put a really hard stance on that. I do want to coach because coaching does allow me to see a perspective or recognize a growth area that I've achieved when sometimes you're in the zone and you don't see it. And speaking to get more of the messages out, related to women in tech, related to leadership and influence, related to travel and kind of globalization.
Yeah,
keep busy.
You've reminded me of something. I wrote a book with my sister for women entrepreneurs about 15 odd years ago, a very long time ago, and there's a lot of research in there, and I've updated the research recently because I was looking back at that, and in the last few weeks I updated it. And you'll know this, on every single metric, women tend to be underinvested in. In other words, it's harder for them to get capital, whether in absolute terms or pro rata, than men. They are less likely to get angel funding, venture capital funding, and they get less pay for the same work on a whole bunch of metrics. Yet, the data shows female-founded companies employ more people, are more profitable, and give a greater return to investors. So there's this massive gap between what economically makes rational sense, which is fund women, yet the venture capital firms tend not to, and the data is quite stark. When they back companies with at least one woman on the board or female founded, the returns for the VC firms improve, they increase. And it's hard to deny causation there. How did you get capital? How did you overcome those hurdles, those additional hurdles that you faced on top of the regular hurdles of setting up a technology business?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we haven't formally raised a round yet. So we've been really creative with how we've been able to acquire investment. We've ran 2 successful crowdfunding campaigns. I've obviously made some big personal investments myself financially into the company, as well as some team members. We've also received several grants and stipends to kind of launch. We recently with Vodafone or in Berlin or 2019 to launch in that city. So we found different ways. We're looking at some convertible debt loan structures. And we have commercialized a lot faster because of that, which I think is a good thing in the long run. And that, we might be a little bit older in terms of our startup age, but we've actually really done the hard work. We've held on to control, because when we have been in rooms before, it would be, oh, great, let's turn this into that direction, which I wasn't comfortable with. And, I'm still very glad that I made that decision. But as I mentioned, kind of some of the other activities, it is about diversifying your portfolio of investments, and all of those that I mentioned kind of do feedback not only in terms of financially, but also in terms of personal growth and professional growth. So I see it as a win-win. But we do, are looking later down the line, maybe in the next year or so, about how we could, engage the right investment, whether it's VC or angels, to take us to the next level and move us a bit faster. But I do see that there is some change, and I'd be interested to hear if you think it's more of a PR kind of, we want female founders, or if there's a genuine change that you've seen in the figures of more investment going in.
I think because of the hard data, which really puts pressure on, say, the VC firms to, when they look at the hard numbers, and it's like, well, how come you're still investing in all male groups when it's clearly the case that you could get better numbers by having more female founders? I think that means it's not just cosmetic. And to the extent, my view is always, to the extent things are cosmetic, fine, as long as we're benefiting and it does the right thing anyway, and then we'll win them over from the inside once they've invested. So I don't even mind the cosmetic part, but obviously I want it to be genuine and heartfelt and people to buy in. And I think that is happening from, I don't think it's just lip service, but I think it happens when, not just when it's one of those things which, everyone gets behind for 5 minutes and it becomes a fad and a fashionable thing to do, and then they forget about it. I think it's got to be more, just like with the environment or other social issues, it's got to be just constantly battling and battling and battling. But as an entrepreneur, it's a battle. Let me, on that basis of sort of the battle, ask you this: secrets of success. Let's imagine you're speaking to a young tech founder, whether male or female, but let's assume for the moment female, whether they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s, doesn't matter. What top tips would you give them? Secrets, as in things they might not have found elsewhere that you've discovered that you thought, oh, I didn't really think that would be really a really useful piece of information. Now, it might be networks they should visit. It could be how to raise capital, the different ways that you mentioned. It might be through mentors, for how to find them, whatever else it might be. What's really surprised you about a secret that's helped you succeed, or several secrets that have helped you succeed?
Certainly, one of the first steps that I really think, and I would recommend for anyone getting started as an entrepreneur, is to go into the communities with other entrepreneurs, surrounding yourself with other people who are doing different things, potentially, most likely, but are making it happen, really does actually show you that there is a possibility. You might go, oh, well, that's, my idea might be a little bit more well thought out, or, I'm, maybe older or have more experience or technical skills here. And it's not a negative kind of comparison, but it is a recognition that you can do something similar. And I think that's why the importance of role models is so important. But building in that community, that entrepreneurial community, and I would recommend going into a lot of different types of communities. Don't just, if you're a developer, don't just stay in a development community. Like, go speak to the UX people, go speak to marketing, like really diversify the types of entrepreneurs that you're exposed to, and different skill sets. I think there's such a wonderful concentration of resources, whether in London or the UK. There's really so many, if you really look into, and we've really benefited from so many different programs, including GEP. The Mayor of London has a great program, London and Partners, and we've graduated from the international program as well. So there's ample resources if you put the time into it. and take it step by step. It can be really overwhelming, and I think at the beginning I really put on the back burner my personal well-being into that kind of rush and maybe a bit of a rat race that I was following other people in that footsteps. Like, I gotta work 16 hours, I gotta cut down on sleep and social life and family time. And I really, over this time, I have made that a priority. And no matter what, if you're looking at the short term or the long term, if you lose your health, whether that's your physical or mental health, your company is not going to run well. Your team is going to fall apart. There's no benefit of hurting or burning yourself out in the process. So always put your well-being first, because that will actually give you space to think more creatively about problems, to digest and not be reactive to different problems that you might be facing, and I believe set a better culture for your team to be in it for the long run.
I love that. I mean, that's you can see that's the insights of somebody who's actually done it and lived it, and I think it's inspiring to everybody listening to that as well. Gillian, the clock has beat us. I really must thank you, not just for doing this interview, but also being part of the Global Entrepreneur Program, adding to the UK's entrepreneurial gene pool of great tech talent that we have over here, being a phenomenal ambassador, not just for the UK and the Global Entrepreneur Program, the Department for International Trade, but also a phenomenal ambassador for entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs, and women tech entrepreneurs as well. But most importantly, entrepreneurs, regardless of gender, and tech entrepreneurs. You're an absolutely phenomenal ambassador who shows what can be achieved and done with a great idea and persistence and passion. So I just want to say thank you to you. Any closing remarks from you?
I would just recommend, if you haven't downloaded the app and you're feeling that you want to look at a safer route, then check us out at safeinthecity.com. And if you have a platform that you're thinking, hey, my dating platform or this delivery service could really benefit, then get in touch with us so that we can help equip you with the information to get people safe. And yeah, reach out on LinkedIn if you want to connect. I know. And then just thank you, Alpesh. Thank you for using your great platform to profile people and champion our younger work in the process. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. No, it's been an absolute pleasure. I have to say, the delight's always mine when you're dealing with great entrepreneurs, because it really energizes those of us with grey hair. When we see the energy from entrepreneurs such as yourself succeeding, it really reinvigorates. So I assure you, we get as much out of it as you do, and the successes that you've had. So yes, I absolutely encourage the audience, please do connect with Gillian on LinkedIn. Do download the app, it's phenomenal. Even if you think, hey, I've never had any issues, actually, please look, download it, review it, see how useful it is. That all helps the algorithms and getting the message out there, and it'll help reach other people. Please promote it and let other people know that it exists as well, because you're helping a tech entrepreneur, you're helping keep society safer as well. So for all those reasons, really happy to be doing this. Thank you so much, Gillian, for agreeing to this interview. Thank you.
Thanks, Alpesh.